The key in my hand was a useless piece of metal. It slid into the lock cylinder of my front door, met a stubborn refusal, and that was that. Changed. They'd actually changed the locks. A slow, cold burn started in my gut, a chemical reaction I knew well. Through the small, leaded glass window, I saw her silhouette moving inside. Karen, HOA president, self-appointed queen of our little cul-de-sac kingdom, probably admiring her handiwork. The email had been vague, citing security upgrades for non-compliant properties, a thinly veiled threat after last week's argument about the precise shade of beige for my mailbox. Non-compliant. I designed containment protocols for facilities that would make this entire neighborhood look like a child's playpen. Her shadow paused. Then she opened the door, a folder clutched to her chest like a shield, a smirk playing on her lips that was pure, unadulterated, petty triumph. "Mr. Henderson," she began, her voice dripping with false concern, "we had to take action. For the community's integrity. The lock she'd installed was a joke, a consumer-grade trifle I could pick with a paperclip and a sigh. She had no idea who she was dealing with, what lines she'd just obliterated. This wasn't about a mailbox anymore. This was about sanctuary. And she just declared war on mine." My hand tightened on the useless key, the metal biting into my palm. A small price. The violation wasn't the cheap lock. It was the audacity, the trespass. My home. The place where my daughter's drawings were taped to the fridge, where my wife's scent lingered on the pillows, where the ghosts of quiet Sunday mornings resided. Karen, with her laminated rules and Napoleonic complex, had breached that. She'd walked through my door, uninvited, unauthorized, and altered the very mechanism designed to keep the wolves out. She was the wolf, cloaked in the cheap fleece of HOA bylaws. The community's integrity, she'd said. My integrity was a different beast altogether, forged in places she couldn't imagine, governed by codes far more stringent than her poorly typed covenants. She prattled on about fines, about the board's unanimous decision, her voice a dull buzzsaw against the sudden, sharp clarity in my mind. They thought this was a power play. They thought they were teaching me a lesson, a flicker of something ancient and protective ignited within me. This wasn't just my house, it was our sanctuary. They didn't know I was the architect of its unseen layered defenses, the silent guardian of its thresholds. They just saw a stubborn resident. They were about to receive a very thorough, very personal education on the nature of consequence. Her words faded. My focus narrowed to the glint of the new inferior deadbolt. Amateur. Later that night, long after Karen had retreated to her own meticulously manicured domain, I sat in my car down the street, the dashboard lights casting a dim green glow. My laptop was open. The irony was a bitter pill, but one that fueled action. They changed my locks, but they hadn't touched my system, the one I'd designed, integrated, and hardwired into the very bones of the house. A few keystrokes, a familiar handshake protocol, and I was in. Iris, the AI I'd developed for the core security OS, greeted me with her usual toneless efficiency. "Welcome back, Administrator." Anomalous lock change detected on entry point alpha at 14:32 hours. Non-authorized physical override. I smiled grimly. "Iris, begin comprehensive data capture. All external cameras, focus on the HOA president's residence. Log all comings and goings. Activate passive audio surveillance on public HOA channels, if legally permissible within local statutes." A soft chime. "Complying. Cross-referencing local surveillance ordinances. Passive collection within acceptable parameters initiated." Then, I called Marcus. "Cypher," I said when he picked up, his voice a crackle of static and caffeine. "I have a situation." HOA. Level 7 annoyance, escalating to Level 3 threat. A low whistle on his end. Level 3? Didn't think a beige dispute could go that far. "What do you need? Digital crowbar? Social engineering toolkit? Documentation," I said, "and a very specific type of public exposure. Phase 1 is intel. They drew first blood. Now we map their arteries." The new lock yielded with embarrassing ease. A high-security tension wrench, a set of custom picks I'd machined myself, 30 seconds, maybe 40. The click of the tumblers falling into place was quiet, precise. A small, satisfying punctuation mark. Inside, the air was stale with their intrusion. I moved through the house, a ghost in my own domain, my senses hyper-alert. First, diagnostics on my primary system. All green. They hadn't been smart enough to even look for it. Then, I replaced their pathetic excuse for a deadbolt with one of my own spares. A Medico M4. Something that would actually require skill, or a drill, to bypass. A small upgrade. A silent message. I re-enabled the internal perimeter sensors. The pressure plates under the windows. The subtle vibration detectors on the doors. Then, I logged back into Iris. Iris? I said, my voice low. Prepare a polite, legally impeccable cease and desist. Cite unlawful entry, trespass, property damage, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Send it certified mail to Karen, and carbon copy her board members and the HOA's legal counsel if they have one. And Iris, add a little something to the watermarked background of the letterhead. Something subtle. Our little inside joke. A schematic, perhaps, of a lock very similar to the one she just had installed, but with all its vulnerabilities highlighted in faint red. They poked the bear. The bear designs advanced deterrence for a living and possesses a deeply personal, morally unflinching commitment to proportional response. This was merely the initial calibration. Karen, predictably, did not react with contrition. The cease and desist, with its subtly mocking watermark, must have bypassed her comprehension and hit a nerve cluster of pure fury. The next morning, a flurry of new notices appeared, plastered to my front door with aggressive strips of tape. Unauthorized alteration of common property, my own damn door. Failure to comply with mandated security protocols, the ones I'd just proven inadequate. Conduct unbecoming a resident. Each one carried a heavier fine, a more strident tone. Then came the escalation I'd half expected, the move from bureaucratic thuggery to something more personal. My daughter's small, brightly painted birdhouse, a gift from her grandfather, lay on the lawn, splintered. An accident, no doubt. A stray dog, perhaps, or a clumsy gardener. My jaw tightened. This was her tell. When the rulebook failed, she resorted to petty, cruel vandalism, thinking herself insulated by her title. The cold fury from the previous day solidified into something harder, sharper, righteous. This wasn't just about locks or bylaws anymore. This was about a fundamental decency she clearly lacked. The transition from tactical defense to strategic offense was now complete. The emotional undercurrent, once explosive, now channeled into a cold, focused resolve. She wanted a war of attrition. She would get a surgical strike. My wife found me staring at the broken birdhouse, her hand finding mine. "Don't let her," she whispered. "Don't let her take this from us." I wouldn't. She's opened the door for a world of pain, legally speaking. David Stern, my lawyer, said, his voice crisp over the phone. Stern was a man who enjoyed the intricate dance of litigation, especially against opponents who believed themselves untouchable. Unlawful entry is a clear tort, possibly criminal trespass depending on intent. The destruction of personal property, even if she tries to feign ignorance, creates a pattern. I listened, nodding. A blueprint of the HOA's publicly available financials spread across my desk, obtained quite easily through Cypher's less conventional channels. I want to go beyond tort, David. I want to look at malfeasance, misuse of funds, possible breaches of fiduciary duty. The documentation Cypher is digging up on their vendor contracts for security upgrades smells fishy. Inflated invoices, kickbacks to a shell corp linked to Karen's brother-in-law. Stern let out a low whistle. Now you're talking. That's not just a slap on the wrist. That's grounds for removal, possibly criminal charges if we can prove intent to defraud. Simultaneously, Iris was executing Phase 2 of the technical counteroffensive. A meticulously crafted, anonymous email was sent to every resident in the HOA, detailing with polite concern the inherent vulnerabilities of the community-wide security upgrade Karen had championed, complete with links to consumer reports and locksmith forums discussing its abysmal rating. It concluded with a helpful suggestion to consider individual, more robust security measures. Panic, I hoped, would be a useful solvent for Karen's authority. The first few confused, then angry replies started hitting the community message board. The seeds of rebellion were sown. The anonymous email about the shoddy security upgrade had the desired effect. Whispers turned into concerned murmurs, then outright complaints on the HOA online forum. Mrs. Henderson, a quiet widow from down the street, posted, "I paid $200 for that new lock. My grandson says it's a piece of junk." Others chimed in, sharing their own stories of Karen's overreach, fines for flower pots, warnings about wind chimes, threats over holiday decorations. The silent majority was finding its voice, fueled by the realization that their dues were potentially being squandered on subpar security and Karen's vendettas. Cypher, my tech-savvy ally, had outdone himself, unearthing a string of emails between Karen and Secure Home Solutions LLC, the company with the familial tie that reeked of collusion. Prices marked up by 300%. Stern was practically salivating. "This is beautiful," he'd said, reviewing the packet. "It's a textbook case of self-dealing." Even Officer Miller, the local beat cop who'd initially dismissed my lock complaint as a civil matter, started showing more interest after Stern paid a visit to the station with a preliminary dossier. He'd seen enough petty tyrants in his time. "Keep me appraised, Mr. Henderson," he'd said, a new respect in his eyes. "If there's provable fraud, we'll act." The narrative was shifting. Karen was no longer the enforcer of rules. She was becoming the villain of a much larger, more damaging story. Her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack, tiny fissures spider-webbing across its smug surface. The upcoming annual HOA meeting was the perfect stage. Karen, emboldened by what she perceived as my silence since the birdhouse incident, would be expecting to preside with her usual iron fist. She wouldn't anticipate a meticulously planned reckoning. The community center meeting room was bland, institutional, perfect for the drama about to unfold. Cypher, posing as a freelance AV tech Stern had hired for the meeting to ensure transparency with a slideshow presentation, was setting up a projector and a surprisingly high-quality sound system. He gave me a subtle nod. Everything was in place. Hidden within his setup were a few additional devices, all perfectly legal for recording a public meeting. Stern had prepared a concise, brutal presentation detailing Karen's fiscal mismanagement, the self-dealing with Secure Home Solutions, and a timeline of her targeted harassment, complete with anonymized testimonials from other residents. My own evidence, security logs, the ease with which I bypassed her mandated lock, photos of the destroyed birdhouse, was woven in. The trap was set. The documents were collated, cross-referenced, and ready for distribution, each page a nail in her coffin. Tonight, Karen's reign of petty tyranny would face a public audit, conducted with surgical precision and backed by irrefutable proof. The air in the room hummed with a nervous energy, the calm before a very calculated storm. I took a seat in the back, a spectator at my own carefully orchestrated play. Justice, I mused, was often best served cold, publicly, and with overwhelming force. Karen beamed from the podium, adjusting the microphone, oblivious. "Welcome, everyone, to our annual meeting," she began, launching into a self-congratulatory spiel about fiscal responsibility and community enhancements. The irony was so thick you could cut it with one of her violation notices. Then Stern rose, calm and authoritative. "Madam President, before we move to new business, there are some urgent matters regarding existing expenditures and conduct that require immediate attention from the members." He gestured to Cypher, and the projector hummed to life. The first slide, a stark comparison of the Secure Home Solutions invoice versus 3 independent quotes for similar, superior lock systems. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face paled. Slide after slide followed, excerpts from the incriminating emails Cypher had unearthed, a flowchart showing the money trail leading suspiciously close to her family, then a summary of legal statutes regarding fiduciary duty and fraud. My own section detailed the unlawful entry, the intimidation. Photos of my daughter's broken birdhouse flashed on screen, a small, potent symbol of her malice. Karen stammered, protested, "This is slander. These are lies." But the evidence was overwhelming, the presentation relentless. Neighbors, previously cowed, started asking pointed questions, their voices growing stronger with each revelation. Her composure shattered. Then, Officer Miller, who had been standing quietly at the back, stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding. "Karen Millworth," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "I have a warrant here for your arrest on charges of felony embezzlement and fraud." The click of handcuffs was louder than any gavel. The Queen had been publicly, spectacularly checkmated, her little kingdom crumbling under the weight of her own greed and arrogance. The aftermath was a cleansing fire. Karen's mugshot splashed across the local news website was a far cry from her usual smug self-importance. The HOA board, minus its disgraced president, was in disarray, but a few sensible residents, including Mrs. Davison, not Henderson, a deliberate choice to show community involvement beyond the protagonist's direct sphere, stepped up to form an interim committee. Stern, with a predatory glint in his eye, initiated civil proceedings to recover the misappropriated funds and seek damages for those of us directly targeted. The ridiculous fines against me were, of course, immediately voided. My locks remained my own. My daughter's new birdhouse, an exact replica of the old one, now sat proudly in the yard, a small monument to resilience. The porch light, the one Karen had once cited me for because its wattage was supposedly non-compliant, burned brightly, a beacon of reclaimed territory. There was a quiet satisfaction in the victory, but it was tinged with a somber understanding of the cost of vigilance. I hadn't sought this war, but when it came to my doorstep, to my family's sanctuary, I had prosecuted it with every ounce of my being. The psychological closure wasn't a locked gate, but the knowledge that a line had been drawn, defended, and would be respected. They learned that day. They learned that some boundaries are absolute, and some people, when pushed, push back with the full, cold, calculated weight of their hidden strengths. They learned not to mess with the man who designed the damn security system. Peace, when it finally settled, felt earned, and a little bit lethal.